My name is Julie. I currently work with my husband, Scott, at his family's small business. This business is managed by my father-in-law, Paul. It's a cozy place with about 5 employees. Paul doesn't get involved much in the daily work. Instead, Scott, who will soon take over as president, works hard. He looks for new clients and projects, showing his dedication to growing the business. When we have a big project, all the employees come together enthusiastically, creating a vibrant atmosphere. I have been working here for 12 years since I got married. Hey Julie, how long do you plan on clinging to our family business? My mother-in-law, Olivia, asked this as I came home early to make dinner, while Scott was still at the office. Olivia had retired from the business when Scott and I got married and seemed happy about her retirement. But now, with more free time, she often criticized me. "What do you mean by clinging?" I asked, trying to stay calm. Olivia sharply replied, "Exactly what it sounds like. You must have married Scott because you couldn't find a job anywhere else, and now you're just taking advantage of our company." I sighed to myself. These kinds of comments from her were becoming more common. When I married, I left my previous job and joined Scott's family business by choice, not because I was fired. For some reason, Olivia thought I was completely unskilled at my job. I said before that it's not that I couldn't work somewhere else. I chose to join Scott's company, I told her, but she answered dismissively, "I can see right through your real intentions." She thought she knew everything about me and walked back to the living room. However, the problems with my mother-in-law weren't just her words. She had quit her job promising to look after the house, but she never helped out. My father-in-law often asked her to do some chores since she was home all day, but she stubbornly refused, saying, "I've worked all my life, now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to do the housework." As a result, I usually ended up making dinner. Olivia seemed to make and eat her own lunch as she liked, but she never cleaned up afterward. Each day, as I returned from my errands, the sight of piled-up plates and utensils greeted me, stirring a mix of frustration and resignation within me. Gathering my courage, I decided to address this domestic issue one sunny afternoon. "Olivia," I began hesitantly, trying to sound as diplomatic as possible, "I've noticed the dishes often get left in the sink. It would be really helpful if you could tidy up after your meals. It's just a small request, but it would mean a lot to me." To my dismay, Olivia's response was far from understanding. Her eyes flashed with anger as she snapped, "Are you trying to give me orders in my own house? You're just a daughter-in-law. How dare you dictate what I should do?" Her sharp and unyielding words reminded me of the delicate balance in our family dynamics. "I wish Helen were here instead of you," Olivia continued, her voice laced with a mix of longing and bitterness. Helen, Scott's younger sister and my sister-in-law, was a spirited and ambitious woman. Our encounters had been limited to brief formal meetings, and she was notably absent from our wedding, having canceled at the last minute. I later learned from Scott that she had overindulged with friends the night before and was nursing a hangover, unable to attend. Despite this, Helen pursued her dreams fiercely, relocating to Jersey after her college graduation to dive into the bustling world of fashion design. In an attempt to change the subject, I mentioned Helen's hard work and dedication. "Helen's really making a name for herself in Jersey, working hard in her field," I said, hoping to ease the tension. However, Olivia's views on Jersey were negative. Jersey, that cold, impersonal city. It's no place for someone as warm-hearted as Helen. "And you're from Jersey too, aren't you? Now it all makes sense. You're always so distant towards me." Caught in this tiring conversation, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, we'd be eating much later than usual. While dealing with my own frustrations, I managed to stay calm. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later. I need to focus on getting dinner ready, or we'll be eating quite late tonight." With some reluctance, Olivia finally went back to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the noise of the cooking utensils. Paul and Scott were both aware of Olivia's mistreatment towards me as a daughter-in-law and tried to intervene whenever they saw it happening. However, their efforts seemed to have little effect. Each time they confronted the situation, their faces showed concern and frustration, showing their desire to create harmony in our family. Ironically, whenever Paul and Scott scolded Olivia for her behavior, she took out her anger on me, becoming even more hostile and sharp with her words. Her face, usually kind and gentle, became twisted with disdain, her tone cutting deeper than before. Although I had never been physically hurt, the emotional impact of Olivia's words was significant. Paul and Scott's support had been my comfort, helping me somewhat ignore Olivia's harsh words until then. One morning, just after I had finished cleaning up from breakfast and was preparing to leave for work, something unimaginable happened. In the midst of the morning rush, as I was hurrying, Olivia suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what a mess!" And without warning, she poured a bucket of water over my handbag. I was stunned, a mix of shock and anger making me speechless. "What are you doing, Olivia?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling with disbelief. Olivia's response was dismissive, her tone like that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff?" "I thought it was just a big piece of trash," she said dismissively, which made me even angrier. "Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of thinking is that? Now the carpet is all wet. Why would you do something like this?" I was really upset as I quickly took the wet things out of my bag, including important work documents, and laid them on the table. Olivia looked calm and didn't seem sorry or worried about how upset I was. "Because you don't need to go to work anymore," she said coolly. I was shocked. In our living room, filled with morning light, I sat across from Olivia. Her face was colder and more determined than usual. It was as if she had made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," I said, confused and surprised. "You've been in this house for 12 years, but now I can finally get rid of you," she declared. Her words hurt me deeply, and her voice had a level of anger and determination I had never heard before. My mind spun and my heart ached. "Getting rid of me?" I asked, unable to believe what I was hearing. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. "Actually, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. All you have to do is bow your head to your father-in-law and Scott, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused," she said with a mocking laugh. She was using my job to push me out. I had spent years at that job, earning respect and making memories. I was shocked and hurt. My devotion to this family seemed to mean nothing to her. It horrified me not just that she acted this way, but that after 12 years of hard work, she could ask me to leave so her daughter could take my place. It felt like my years of effort were being disregarded. "Really? Are you sure about this? Wasn't Helen working in a clothing store in Jersey?" I asked, reflecting my confusion and worry. My job was more than just a paycheck. It was my way of fulfilling myself. Meanwhile, Helen, my sister-in-law, seemed to have grown tired of city life and decided to come back to the family. She said she was tired of the unfriendly people in Jersey, so I told her if she came back home, I'd have a job ready for her. She agreed to return immediately. "Now that she's coming back, I want you out of this house," she told me. I couldn't believe her words. She was ready to turn my life upside down with just one decision, completely ignoring my role in the family and not even listening to me. She handed me an envelope, saying, "I've written your resignation letter," and just like that, she kicked me out. My heart broke. Everything I had built over the years seemed worthless, treated like just a piece of paper. Her actions deeply hurt our family bond. I walked to the company, just a quick 5-minute walk from my house. As I walked under the cool morning sky, each step was heavy with the weight of what was happening. When I told my father-in-law, Paul, and my husband, Scott, about what my mother-in-law had said, they were shocked but stayed calm. They suggested that maybe it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. This idea upset me deeply. I had worked hard in our family business for years and barely knew what a long vacation was like, aside from short breaks during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by Scott and Paul's kind words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I decided to go on a little trip. As I packed, I thought a lot about my life, my choices, and what was ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Helen, who was supposed to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 3:00 p.m. Her lack of responsibility disappointed Scott and Paul, who had been managing without me. Helen seemed not interested in learning the work despite their efforts to teach her. Hearing this made me worry about the future of our company, even as I looked forward to my trip. Leaving without seeing my mother-in-law, I quickly started my journey. During the trip, as I enjoyed the view from the train, I reflected on my life past, present, and future, and savored local seafood delicacies. I thought deeply about myself, my family, and our business. But on the 5 days of my trip, the peace was broken when Helen called me crying. "What's going on?" I asked. "Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but Scott and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right," she said. Her words, likely influenced by my mother-in-law, surprised me even as I was enjoying my break. I decided it was time to address the situation. "So Helen, how good are you with computers?" I asked her. Hesitantly, she replied, "Well, I usually watch videos online, and I play games too." This question was to see if Helen could adjust to a new job. Having worked in a clothing store in Jersey for a while, her computer skills seemed basic. "Do you know how to use Word or Excel?" I asked. Helen looked confused, showing she wasn't familiar with these tools in a professional setting. Even in clothing stores, tasks like managing sales data in Excel or recording customer info in Word are common. Have you ever worked with image editing, video editing, or audio editing software? Do you have any experience with such tools? I asked. Helen, clearly puzzled, replied, "What's all that?" This question aimed to dig deeper into her technical skills to better understand her capabilities. Considering her background in the apparel industry, it's unlikely she never used a computer. Tasks like tracking sales, managing inventory, and inputting customer data would have required her to use Excel. When asked if she can handle calculations for sales or fill in documents, she confidently said, "I can do that." However, when I asked if she could also calculate tax, her confidence faded, and she answered uncertainly, This question tested her math skills and her ability to use them in a business context. While Helen might have other skills, it was clear she was insecure about the necessary skills for the job. Her discomfort seemed mainly due to her struggle with calculations, which could explain why she faced criticism from Paul and Scott. First and foremost, I needed to show my mother-in-law and those who tried to push me out that they were mistaken. "Since you're taking over my job," I began. I told Helen that she needed to handle the accounting tasks well and remember to be professional in her emails, because a casual tone that might be fine with friends doesn't work for business. She would also be in charge of scheduling the staff shifts. Even though our team is small, we carefully consider everyone's time off requests, so she shouldn't just think about what's convenient for her. As I listed these expectations, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the phone. But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. "Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this," she said, and then abruptly ended the call. Over the next 4 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Jersey, the place Helen had left. My time there showed me that not everyone in Jersey is unfriendly actually. Finding someone as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Helen seemed rare. A week after I left my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. When I arrived, Olivia, looking very upset, confronted me angrily. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," she yelled, her eyes full of anger and misunderstanding. She tried to grab me, but Scott and Paul quickly stepped in to calm her down, though her anger didn't seem to lessen. Scott sighed deeply before saying, "Helen is upset because she was scolded for trying to boss her employees around despite not being able to do the job right. It's not Julie's fault. Besides, Julie hasn't been here for a week, so she couldn't have upset Helen. Mom, you really need to stop these groundless accusations." But Olivia kept blaming me. "It's because of her. This woman is the reason for Helen's trouble," she claimed, her voice emotional and filled with baseless suspicions. "Where is Helen, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room, but Helen was nowhere to be seen. Her absence added more confusion to an already puzzling situation. While it didn't matter to me that Olivia was upset about Helen, I knew Helen didn't have many options since she had ended her lease at her apartment in Jersey. I thought Helen would be at her parents' house, but she wasn't there, which made me wonder. Helen's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore, Scott explained. It seemed like Helen had avoided learning the job properly. It was understandable, though, because she didn't have the skills needed to replace me. "You've been turning Scott and Paul against me, haven't you? Otherwise, they wouldn't say the company ran better with you than with Helen, who can't do the job," Olivia accused me sharply. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me completely baffled. She seemed to have always seen me as an opponent, her words reflecting years of wrong ideas. Scott let out a heavy sigh, his face showing his tiredness and frustration with the complicated emotions in our family. He had tried many times to clear up the misunderstandings among family members, but it didn't seem to work very well. "Mom, I know it might sound odd coming from me, but Julie is truly exceptional at her work. She's certified in bookkeeping and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she's studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Julie handles everything," Scott said with a sense of pride. His mother, Olivia, looked very surprised. She had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. "What? That sounds like something straight out of a TV drama," I thought, recalling my college days. I was so focused on getting various certifications that I immersed myself in my studies, so much that I barely had time for clubs or a romantic relationship. It was during this busy time that I met Scott, who came to my company for business. As I found myself sharing the story of how Scott and I first met, I realized that this wasn't what Olivia wanted to hear. So I quickly got back to the main point. In short, I was responsible for a lot of tasks at the company, from handling accounting to scheduling, working with other companies, and managing employee shifts. Thanks to that, I could reach out to other businesses for deals, making the work environment much more comfortable than when Olivia was around. Scott added this, leaving Olivia speechless in amazement. Just then, Paul, Scott's father, made a comment that surprised me. "We're going to shut down the company soon, actually. Helen made a big mistake. Even though she was supposed to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun. While Scott and I were away, she ended up being rude to the person in charge from another company. Of course, I got a call to confirm this." Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. "I can't believe Helen would do something like that," I murmured, filled with disbelief. The thought that Helen's actions might lead to the downfall of our company went through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I was lost in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. "We had mentioned this to you before, right? About being absorbed by another company," they said. Then, the president of company stepped forward, saying he was interested if Julie and I were involved. This was an unexpected but long hoped-for development. Running a family business has its limits, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently attract stable customers. That's why Scott had always worked hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean having a steady base of customers. The future, once uncertain, suddenly seemed to have a bit of hope. However, this news only brought relief to me, Scott, and his father. Scott's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. Scott must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was surprised by this sudden change. It seemed that more than a stable future, Olivia was concerned about maintaining the prestige of being part of a company president's family. "And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore? Absolutely not acceptable," Olivia exclaimed passionately. This commotion caught the interest of Helen, who was upstairs in her room, leading her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Olivia, Paul spoke up calmly but firmly, "I am divorcing you, so either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my son's wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, you spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer." This was news to both me and Scott. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Paul with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning, as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Olivia with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. "If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't ask for alimony. I know getting any money from you would be pointless anyway," Paul said. "So unfair. How can you say that? Haven't I been devoted to this house all these years?" Olivia protested. "Devoted to this house? Have you done any real housework in the last 12 years? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house?" Paul countered. It was the first time we saw him this angry. Seeing this, Helen, who had come down to the living room, was visibly shaking from shock. "Helen, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Jersey, and now you can't find a job, but still act superior. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Who did you inherit this escapism from? It's time for you to leave this house too," he continued. Next, we saw Helen's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family, but the reality was different. "Wait a minute, Dad. Mom might be a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter, right?" she said. The family conflict deepened as Helen tried to assert her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. "Helen, are you betraying me now?" Olivia exclaimed, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to argue loudly, Paul sternly silenced them with a shout. "If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone, so I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready." Left with no choice, Olivia and Helen began packing their belongings. Then, an acquaintance of Paul arrived to take Olivia and Helen away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. Meanwhile, Scott, Paul, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant. When I told the president of Company A, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, Scott and Paul are working even harder for